Hi, everybody. My name is John Fraze. I'm a Senior Managing Director at Ankara, and I run the Global Labor Strategy Division. I am here with Dave Gilbertson, who's a Vice President at UKG. And we are here to talk about what everybody's talking about, which is the labor shortage, or maybe the labor participation issue. There's a lot of ways we couch this, and it seems like everybody has a very strong opinion about this topic.
Strong opinions loosely held.
Yes.
They're all over the place.
Always certain, rarely right. And so I thought we could jump into the science of it together today and talk about facts and figures. Some of them are uncomfortable, but I think that debating these issues is important. And when we talk about it, folks often say it's this one thing, whether it's government checks or something else, and we can get into all of that. But I think what I've learned more and more is it's about 50 different things.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to pass it over to you to just, pontificate a little bit about what you're thinking on this issue and what you've been up to, because you've been working on this issue.
Yeah. So we've been taking a hard look at labor participation and who's working, who's not working. We realized early in the pandemic that because we're literally measuring who worked yesterday, right? Between who's punching in and punching out, who's getting paid, who's not getting paid. And in an absolutely unintentional way, we ended up with this treasure trove of data that initially we just started out trying to answer the question of how are we going to weather this downturn? And all of a sudden we started seeing, no, this is actually an indicator of how the country is weathering the downturn, and more importantly, the recovery. So we've been measuring throughout the pandemic all of the workforce activity around the country, predominantly among hourly workers, and it has been fascinating to see where the recovery's been delayed, where it's been accelerated.
I thought it would be like, and again, we have a lot of experts in healthcare in our firm. I'm not one of them. Edit that later. Just kidding. But we do have a lot of experts, and for me, I initially thought, well, this is a healthcare problem, the pandemic. So of course, people are going to be, the health systems are going to be flush with business, and it's going to be great. And that wasn't the case. That
absolutely wasn't the case. No, the healthcare employment went down a little bit. Didn't go down as much as the rest of the hourly workforce. But boy, has it taken forever to come back. And we've actually seen a decline in the number of shifts worked at healthcare companies 9 of the last 10 months.
Wow.
In the middle of a pandemic. Like, who would have thought that's healthcare hiring is the issue? When you look at how many jobs are available, it's, they're more than plentiful. They just can't get people to fill them.
It's wild. And if you couple that with the fact that in the beginning they canceled all the elective surgeries. If you need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless you really needed it.
Right.
And so that was really tough.
Yeah.
But, it comes back, and I wanted to sort of jump into the biggest issue that people talk about, which is it's all about the money. And I think that it's partially about the money, but let's talk about wages. Is it really about the wage? Maybe some places it is, maybe at some places it isn't. And is it about government checks as well? I'll give you all of those.
So the answer is yes. Yes.
Yes, no, and maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. No, when you look at it, when you start talking to folks that are hourly workers that are going through these really tough decisions of, I've been out of work for a while, but my kid doesn't have consistent daycare, or my parent is very much immunocompromised. I don't feel real comfortable returning to a job working with the public. These are complicated decisions. Certainly pay is an element of it, but we've seen, you can't drive down a main street in this country without seeing signs out front saying, we'll pay $18. And then, I just saw one last week. Burger King said, we'll pay $18. Literally the liquor store next door, sign that was even bigger saying, we'll pay $20.
Yeah.
Right? And they're both cutting the hours they're open, because that's clearly not the issue. The issue is all the certainty around childcare and around elder care and around making sure that I'm going to be safe when I go to work. These are critical things that don't just turn around on a dime. I think it's going to take a while for that to come back. I do think we're going to see a lot better environment here once school starts up, and all of a sudden your family calendar is back to being normal. Right? We've just had 456 straight days to take your kid to work day.
Exactly. Right? It's not even fun for one day.
No, exactly. Yeah, I'm good now for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But I think if you're an hourly worker where you're going into an environment where you may be a little bit more uncertain in your schedule, to couple that with an uncertainty in your family schedule as well, that's a tough thing to consider. I think that's a big part of why people are not taking all these jobs that are seemingly plentifully available.
And we had a labor shortage before the pandemic, right? And so I remember driving down the highway in Minneapolis, headed south to some client, and it said, on one side of the highway, on the side of a distribution center, it said $19.50 an hour to start, pick to light environment, no skills required. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, it said $19.75, no skills required, $22 an hour after the first 6 months.
Yeah. So
that's Minneapolis. In Iowa, where I was last week, I have a very large client there, and there's competitors offering $8,000 signing bonuses to hourly employees that make $19 or $20 an hour.
Sure.
How do you compete in the long term when you have 2,000 to 3,000 employees? What is the financial impact there? And then what do you owe the employees that are already with you?
Yeah.
And then you talk about wage compression and everything else. Now, the one that has killed me the most, although I've enjoyed the statistics because I think it plays against the common idea around it's all about the money, is Allentown, Pennsylvania. Allentown, Pennsylvania is a manufacturing and distribution hub for the Northeast.
And home of the Allentown Iron Pigs, I believe, right?
It's most importantly,
right.
most importantly. And, people think of Allentown, and I think it's a Billy Joel song that's very pejorative.
Of course, in the 70s, yeah.
But this is a town with very high wages, $25 an hour to start, no skills required, no college education required. They will train you. And there's easily over 1,000 open positions in Allentown right now at that rate.
Yeah.
So if this is about government checks or about raising the minimum wage, why aren't people taking those jobs?
Right.
And I know there's politics on both sides around this. Free market, there should be no minimum wage versus it should be $15 or a living wage.
Yeah.
A lot of opinions. I'm not here to talk about what socially is responsible, and I think we all have opinions about that. But what moves the needle? And we're finding in Allentown, Pennsylvania, $25 does not move the needle.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think that's indicative of the rest of the country. So we started taking a look at about 26 states actually got rid of the incremental federal unemployment benefit in June.
This is politics coming, by the way. Be prepared.
It's not.
This is facts. These are the facts.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we actually set out to try to take politics out of it.
Yes.
And so 26 states that removed federal unemployment benefits and 24 states that kept them. So what happened? Did that actually encourage people to return to work? This narrative was that, they're kind of getting fat and happy off of...
Wait until September when it all goes away, they said, right? When all the federal goes away, and that's when we're going to get people back. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will tell you, are those the people you actually want back, right? The ones that are... The reason why they didn't come is they got an extra $400.
That's right. Well, I actually think people are going to get back in September, but we'll get to that in a second. So what we found is that when you look at the states that were... that removed the unemployment benefits in June, fast forward a month, and a month in, they actually grew at half the rate of the states that kept the federal benefit.
So they did worse.
Now, granted, they were doing worse earlier in the year.
Okay.
And part of it is that they didn't fall quite as far during the depths of the pandemic, so they didn't have quite as far to come back. So it wasn't surprising that they weren't accelerating at quite the same pace. But what it did show is that this isn't the thing keeping people away.
Right. Now tell me about September, because we talked about going back to school earlier. You mentioned that.
I can't wait for this. I'm going to give you a preview. It's like I can see the future. The future is going to be headlines screaming.
I'm calling my broker.
Unemployment benefits go away. Jobs skyrocket.
Okay.
But the truth is, kids are starting back to school.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that are positive in people's lives that are happening in September that have nothing to do with the federal unemployment benefits.
So it's not okay to be intellectually lazy on this topic, right?
I think that's
and to say, it's all about the money. Now I can go. And it's the same with our clients. It's say if I just give them $2 an hour more, we solve the problem.
Yeah.
You may stop the bleeding for 3 to 4 months, but you're not solving the problem. We have a deep cultural issue, right, that has a lot of different dimensions to it. So September, you think back to school is a big one.
Yep.
We're going to see more people going back to work. Terrific.
Yeah. Once you get certainty in your personal schedule, boy, does that free you up to be able to take some of these jobs, and you have enough runway that you now will have seen plenty of jobs out there, and you got a number to pick from. to decide what environment do I want to be in. I think one of the lasting impacts of the pandemic and all this time we've spent working remotely and figuring out how to lead remotely, I think one of the lasting impacts is going to be the pressure on businesses to up the benefits that they provide. I'm not just talking about healthcare benefits. I'm talking about the overall quality of work benefits is going to be elevated, and I think it's going to be elevated for a long time, right? You've got to offer on-demand pay. You've got to offer more vacation. You've got to offer, I saw a couple big retailers now offering education benefits to say, we'll pay for all your college if you just come and work here while you're going to college. I think those are going to be standard. The expectation among people that have plenty of options for new jobs.
It's tricky.
It's
and
really
there's
tricky.
only one way these things go generally, right? You don't get to roll them back later.
That's right.
And so I have a
That's
range
exactly
of
right.
clients right now that are saying, okay,
Yeah.
I'm competing against the $8,000 signing bonus. I have 3,000 employees. If I do this, I'm stuck. And for me, it might be $70 to $100 million in cost.
Yeah.
So what do I do? Can I afford to do this in the long term? So I think all of this is interesting. I think that the September story is especially interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, I hope it gets people thinking about the fact that this is a multidimensional problem, right? Mm-hmm. There's, again, not one thing, there's 50 things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about demographics for a second. This is where I get into trouble regularly. I'm going to throw a couple of things at you, okay? Number one, marriage rates are the lowest they've been in I think 30 or 40 years, and the chart is like, it looks terrible. So if people aren't getting married, they're still getting married, but at the lowest rates since 40, 50 years maybe. We've got the lowest birth rates. It's below 2 children per couple, mm-hmm. right? So we're not replacing the population.
Yep.
We have 52% of 19 to 29-year-olds, 18 to 29-year-olds living at home with their parents.
Yeah.
I'll start with those. We'll get into wealth in a second. But if you look at all those things, do I need to work night shift on the weekends, making dog food or ice cream or anything, or delivering packages for a big FedEx or UPS? Do I need to do these jobs?
Yeah. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how that plays out. That's where the benefits come in.
Yeah.
Right? I think the ability to have some flexibility in those schedules, the ability of factories to flex up and down, I think is going to be the only way out, because you're absolutely right. There's very few incremental reasons for you to work the third shift if you don't absolutely have to, and a lot of folks now don't absolutely have to.
$25 an hour, but I don't need $25 an hour.
Right.
So I don't need to work, by the way, 12 days in a row with 2 days off, or some very difficult schedule which allows me to have no social life. Whether it's services, distribution, retail, call center, manufacturing, it doesn't matter. They're all begging for as many hours as they can get from you. When really, if you're not having kids and you're not getting married, why wouldn't you live at home with mom and dad?
Yeah.
And I always joke, and you've heard me say this before, right? Mom makes a pretty good chicken parm and the Wi-Fi's free.
Uh-huh.
It's a pretty good gig.
Yeah.
So and we all say no, you're supposed to get a terrible apartment in a bad neighborhood and go into severe debt.
Yeah. Be miserable like we were.
Yeah, we were miserable. You should be miserable too.
Exactly.
And I think that's a trick. Yeah. And going back to your point about kids going back to school, Greg Gordon, one of your colleagues, talks a lot about the caring generation. Mm-hmm. I've got kids that I'm taking care of, but I also have elderly parents that I'm taking care of.
Yeah.
And these are very responsible people.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, they're not going back to work. This is laziness. No, they've got more than a full plate of both groups. And I believe in hard work. I believe in showing up and putting in the hours. But when I look at what these people are doing, I say they're already doing that.
Yeah.
And thank goodness they are, because it's probably not taxing our public health system as much because they're showing up to chip in.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical social need. And I think that's a part of what's contributing to the challenges in healthcare. That's the generation that are trained to be nurses. That's the generation that generally the healthcare firms are hiring. They're just not going back to the workforce. So talk a little bit about the labor participation rate. So we've talked offline a bit about the baby boomers are retiring in greater numbers than ever.
They call it the silver tsunami. Is what they call it. Names. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, what are your thoughts on the silver tsunami?
So again, we want people in a distressed situation so they feel like they have to come to work, which is awful. We don't really want that. Right. But that helps our economy. And especially in an environment where there's demand for products and services across the board. Everybody's trying to find things and buy things and do things. And we've got a group of people that are the wealthiest generation we've ever had. On average, the boomer household is worth $1.2 million, which is, it doesn't seem like a lot when you think about the healthcare demands and all the other things that people have to pay for.
Yeah.
But it's the most we've ever seen. And that means their children also don't need to work a job to help pay the mortgage, the rent, the family farm, and all this other stuff. And so again, they've got more money. They have worked their tails off. They've got retirement savings, and the retirements are a big problem for us because that's the other side of labor participation. These people are leaving the workforce.
Yeah.
And they're leaving with an incredible amount of skill and experience.
Yeah.
With a younger generation that doesn't want to do a lot of those jobs. And by the way, it doesn't mean these people don't want to work.
Yeah.
It just means they don't want to do
Sure.
these jobs.
Yep.
So it's tricky. Yeah.
I think that's actually going to extend this recovery by quite a bit, right? I don't know what it's going to take for that labor participation to come back up, but to your point, a lot of them are leaving with 30 to 40 years worth of skills built up. We're not going to replace that as a country overnight.
And I can tell you, we have not done a good job documenting any of those skills or experience. So it's going to be an issue.
True. Yeah.
Now, going back to the massive amount of data that you folks have, where are we? If we were at 100 in February before this thing came, although we said like something's happening in China and this might be bad. And then in March, my last flight was March 17th until August, where I started flying again and did not stop. I worked on the vaccine, I worked on the food supply chain, all this other stuff. But where are we? If we were at 100 in February, where did we go? And I don't know if you want to break it out at all, but where did we go and where are we now?
Yeah, so every industry was different, every geography is a little bit different, but we went down to, if we were at 100 in February, we went down to about 60 to 65, which in a market where you rarely swing by more than a couple points in a 6-month period.
It's massive.
Massive impact. And then there was this snap back to get back up to 80 or so pretty quickly, like within a month or two. And then at this point, to get from 80 to 90 took probably 6 to 8 months. And we've been holding pretty steady at about 90% recovered for now long enough that it's becoming concerning, right? We've very clearly plateaued in this recovery. That's why there is a lot of hope. We've seen some kind of green shoots this summer of more workforce activity. In June was pretty good. July wasn't quite as good, but it was still positive. Like we're seeing a little bit of incrementalizing getting out of that plateau. But I think this fall will be the real indicator. And of course you got the Delta variant as the wild card. So we'll see what happens. I can't wait to know what's
after Delta. So look, who do we have next? And so I keep on thinking about it, and I didn't have the 80 and 90. I knew that we weren't there yet. I keep on thinking like how are we not there yet if we have so many opportunities out there and people are spending money and they're going back and we just can't get back. And even in some of the PE firms that we have relationships with, I find it interesting that folks that are the 25-year-old associate who's the go-getter, will work 90 hours a week, whatever it takes. They got a little taste of this work from home thing. And I can tell you they don't want to come back, and we're seeing in investment banking and private equity and hedge funds, people are resigning. Because they don't want to go back to the office. They'll work from home, but they won't work from the office. And this, I don't know how real this is, but the great resignation is what they're calling it. Don't do that, anyone watching. But this great resignation is something that I think I'm a little concerned about. We can't get we can't get to 100 anymore.
John the alarmist.
Exactly.
I'm honestly not super concerned about it because we had such high employee retention throughout the pandemic that I feel like it was natural. Everybody went through this traumatic event. Everybody was stressed. I think it was kind of natural to have a little bit of a snapback to say, of course you're going to have a great resignation. Of course a whole bunch of people are going to leave their jobs because they just need something different. They've been working from home in the same chair every single day, all day, with the same people, right?
But they still have to work, so they may
go
somewhere else,
and so they're going to go somewhere else. They just need a different environment, a different something. Even if they're still working from home, it's still a different environment. I don't think that that's going to last real long. I'm expecting like a 6-month period, maybe.
I was joking
After
with
that.
you. I was joking with you about Monster.com. Monster.com did a study, and they said that 95% of the people on their site were considering looking at another job. And I said, yeah, that's because they're on Monster.com. This is not a real study. However, 41% in a study that Microsoft did of global workers said that not that they were looking at some great resignation, but that they were looking at changing companies. So 41% is a big number. I trust Microsoft on this. But it doesn't mean that they're all going to resign and not do anything, right? They still have rent to pay, and they still have bills. And even the ones that are living at home with mom and dad, and that's 52% of 18 to 29-year-olds, they still need a job. It's just what that job is. The gig economy is really good for them if they want 10 to 15 to 20 hours. They don't believe in healthcare generally, so that shouldn't be a problem for them. I'm so healthy today, I'm sure it's not going to change.
It's always going to last.
Now, the one, and I'll end my statistics with this, and we can kind of talk about solutions a little bit, is that organized religion. So this is, you would never want to touch organized religion, but I will tell you that the stats
touch politics, so
we
why
already
not?
have politics. It's not about the government checks. Is for the first time since it's been tracked, organized religion has fallen below 50% of our population.
Saw that, yeah.
And listen, my grandfather was a Presbyterian minister. My wife's grandfather was a Baptist minister. We have a lot of church in our lives. And church is a construct that creates certain behaviors. And, I think when you have people going to church, they're following a certain social construct and they have a certain set of beliefs. Often those beliefs involve having children and having a steady job. Yeah. And so as we watch that drop, people are saying, well, listen, I think there might be a better way to do this. Yeah. I think that there might be something that's not the norm that I could do that could work for me. And it's just another, again, it's not about the checks. Yeah. I always say it's not about the money because, it's not about the wages, right? Because we see $25 an hour and it's not getting people to come to work. Right, but it's about the money because it's the $1.2 million in wealth for the boomers. Yeah. But these social constructs, there's 50 different things that we're talking about. You can't just talk about one of them.
I think that's right, but I think that's why you have to put them in buckets, right? So those you're talking about really long-term, like decade-long trends that are going to take a long time to play out and a long time to course correct. And at the same time, we're also
part
talking
of my alarmist world is like it's all over forever.
Right. And at the same time, we're also talking about issues that are probably 3-month issues, 6-month issues.
And those are the ones that you're so good at looking at with the punch data.
Because we can see it turn. Yes. Literally, the week that it turns, we can see it. Yeah. But part of the challenge, I think, for a manager and leader today is to manage all of that. And I think one of the great opportunities we've got as we start kind of transitioning into solutions, one of the great opportunities we've got in terms of from a leadership standpoint is to use this time as we're rebuilding our teams as we do see higher turnover to add some diversity in, right? We're a great example. We got 2 middle-aged white guys here starting off about what it looks like to be.
When did I become middle-aged? I'm 47. That's still that's early in life.
Absolutely. But no, it's easy for us to say what what's inside the mind of an hourly worker. But the reality is we got to expand out our knowledge base and expand out who we're talking to, who we're including in the conversation. I do think that the topic around diversity inclusion is going to be a long-range one. We're seeing that in the HCM market right now. Every single prospect we talk to is asking about what our approach is to diversity and inclusion. I think that's one of the trends that's got legs, and I think that's going to be a real benefit as we come out of this downturn, is you will see a lot more diversity and voices that are influencing these discussions.
So we did a study with Workforce Insight, and we were helped with UKG as well. You folks helped us out with it, that looked at agility, which is, do employees feel like they have access to the right information? Yep. And then do they feel like they're in a culture of an enablement where they can have decision rights? And what we found is that companies, and we looked at over 200 big companies, and we found that companies are very good at talking about, you've got the decision rights, you've got all this stuff. They're very bad at giving employees access to information. They hold information very dear because they're afraid that the employees might find something out. Right. And so what we found as a team is that employees are actually sort of put in a position where they can make some really bad decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We love you guys, you're empowered, go make it happen, don't look at any of the files. Right. And that's a terrible recipe. Yeah. When you don't have access to information, I always say it's like Chris Webber in the NCAA championship where he called a timeout that he didn't have. Right. He had decision rights,
Yeah.
but he didn't have access to the information.
Yeah.
And I'm a Michigan fan, so no hate mail, please. But I think that technology plays a role in that. I don't want to make this about technology, but technology plays a role in putting the right information at the right hands at the right time, so that people that require decision rights to stay at a company can make better decisions faster.
Yeah. I think technology is a big component of that, and just getting comfortable trusting. I think that's part of the generational turnover. That's it's something that's a little bit more comfortable with Gen X, even more comfortable with Gen Y leaders, kind of as you get deeper into the generation. That's just an expectation, is that you got to be able to trust your employees. That's not something that every company has adopted yet. So I think that's a leadership challenge for us all. A big part of it was when we were all forced to trust that you're doing work from home, even though I can't see you in the office every day.
Right.
And I think that I do think that element of trust and transparency is going to be a lasting part of the coming out of the pandemic. However, the transparency piece is going to be the hardest for a lot of companies.
It's like trust or verify.
That's right.
Believe in God, but lock your doors.
Yeah.
But it's all, your boss wrote a book on this, right? Where Aaron wrote a chapter called Trust.
Yeah.
And he said, it's amazing that we spend so much time interviewing people and take them through the whole process, and then we hire them and we say, now you've got to earn my trust.
Right.
And it's like, what? What's going on? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And I agree with him, mostly because I'm afraid not to agree with him. No, I agree with him because I think it's a brilliant point that we've got to trust people. But that agility story, I think, is sounds like consulting speak. So I break it down into, I need access to information, and I need the right level of decision rights. And we have clients that say, we've got the best hiring practices. We hire the smartest people, and for some reason, they don't stay.
Yeah.
And we say, what are you hiring to do? Well, they stand and they stare at a screen, and every 15 minutes they push a button to reset the system. You don't want somebody who's got a college education as a button pusher.
Yeah.
And forget about college. Somebody who's intellectually curious is not going to survive at a job like that. So it's also putting people in the right place at the right time.
Yep.
So for me, in summary, decision rights, access to information, this is a 50-point problem. I like the long-term scary stuff. You've got your hands on the short-term stuff and the long-term stuff.
So together, we're in good shape.
Together, I know. Keep calling me, please.
Right.
Do you want to add anything to close?
Oh, I think we've covered all the high points. It'll be an interesting fall.
Yeah, it's going to be. And you mean fall by season?
That's right. Exactly.
On that note, Dave, thank you very much for having me here, and thanks to UKG for hosting us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Take care.